I'll call the meeting to order. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that we are in Treaty 1 territory and traditional homeland of the Métis Nation. I'll introduce the panel members. To my left is Lynn Nesbitt. Far left, Robert Upton. The assessor today is Ryan Valderrama. Our administrative assistant today is Kelsey Harrison. I'm Marcel Lorondo. I'll be chairing. We'll be hearing applications for revision of the assessment roll in accordance with the Municipal Act. The matters for which revision is requested have been described in each application, and we will limit the discussion to those matters. The statements that applicants or the assessor make at this hearing are sworn testimony. Anyone speaking to the matters must be sworn in. Be advised that comparisons of assessment of properties are not considered evidence of market value by the Board of Revision. The Board of Revision is appointed annually by Council as independent of it and the City Administration. It makes its decisions on the basis of the evidence provided at this hearing and issues a written order that will be mailed to all parties as soon as possible. Please note that the Board's decision with respect to an application may be appealed to the Manitoba Municipal Board if the matter pertains to assessed value or classification, or the Court of Queen's Bench if the matter pertains to applications of exemption from taxation. Should you wish to appeal, information on how to do so will be included with the Board order. With respect to the hearing process, I will confirm the matters to be addressed with each applicant following the swearing in. We will then have the assessor's testimony followed by questions that the applicant may have, and then the applicant's testimony followed by questions. Each side will have an opportunity to summarize if they wish. Once all the evidence about an application has been brought forward, the applicant may leave. The process will repeat for each item on the docket today. The session will close after the applications have been heard, and the Board will deliberate in private and make its decisions. You will receive the order by registered mail as soon as possible. As information, all public hearings are live streamed, recorded, and will be part of the public record. You can swear them in, please.
Do you swear in or affirm? Could you please state your name?
Thank you. Ryan Valderrama.
And do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you. You affirm? Could you please state your name? And do you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you.
First item on the docket today will be 15 Rhea Crescent. When you are ready, Mr. Valderrama.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The property has a file number of 19-3969. It has a roll number 0400248500. It is located at 15 Ray Crescent. We're dealing with the roll year of 2020 using reference date of April 1st, 2018. The assessed value is $16,621,000. The property is used as an apartment with the zoning of residential multi-family. It has an actual year built of 1976 with 144 suites, 161 outdoor parking, a land area of 133,630 square feet, plan area of 25,898 square feet, and a gross floor area of 157,748 square feet. On page 3 are the aerial photos of the subject property. On page 4 is the income valuation summary. The gross potential rent for this apartment is $1,731,370. It has a vacancy of 2.6%, an expense ratio of 50.72%, giving it a net operating income of $831,035. And given a capitalization rate of 5%, the capitalized income is $16,620,700. On page 5 are some rent comparables. They're all ranging from $951 up to $1,014. Gross air. Oh, sorry. I was looking at the wrong line, Mr. Chair. Sorry about that. The rent per unit is $981 up to $1,101 per month. And on page 6 is the map of the subject property and comparable rents. They are all color coded. On page 7 is the capitalization rates, and on page 8 is the capitalization rate evidence. If I'll just read through the blurb, and this applies to all properties, Mr. Chair. I have the same capitalization rate evidence on the rest of the properties for today's docket. The following is a sample of actual sales that took place during the reference period. The purpose for showing these individual capitalization rates is to illustrate the accuracy of the model and substantiate the model-derived capitalization rates. They are not meant to be comparable specific to the Net operating income has been developed through stabilizing owner-reported income and expense information. Capitalization rates have been derived by dividing property's net operating income by its sale price. On the third section of this chart is the multifamily section. There are 5 properties that were used, or 5 sales. They're all ranging from 4.03% up to 6.09% of cap rate. And on page 10, up to the last page is the 2017 income and expense information for the subject property, Mr. Chair, and that's my presentation.
Mr. Reimer, any questions?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. So just to preface my questions, the focus of this debate is going to be on cap rate for this property. And could I ask that the questions that I'm about to ask be carried forward as well to the remaining properties? Thank you. Okay, Mr. Valderrama, so to go through it briefly then, on your page 4, the entire valuation of the subject that you've laid out there, this is all model-driven parameters, including the capitalization rate, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Now then, because cap rate is going to be sort of central to this case, on page 7, that's the chart, the summary of the cap rates, but the department hasn't provided you with any of the data underlying how these cap rates were calculated, correct? There's no workups for, or you can't tell which properties were included, you can't tell how the NOIs were calculated, etc., for the properties that were included in the study, correct?
None. However, Mr. Chair, these are all the cap rates that we have for all properties that are under assessed, that are being assessed, I should say.
Right. So it's the model. It's the model's conclusions without the supporting evidence, though. There's no evidence behind that summary, correct?
Specific to properties, no, we didn't include the properties.
Okay, and then on page 8 then, so again, Mr. Valderrama, you've got the sale price and the cap rate, but the department hasn't provided you with the income summaries or any evidence to demonstrate how the stabilized NOI was calculated, correct?
How the NOI was derived is in the second to the last page on top of it. Net operating income has been developed through stabilizing owner-reported income and expense information.
I get that that's the statement that's being made,
yes.
But the department, there's no evidence, put it this way, there's no evidence as to how what the suite income actually is relative to how the department stabilized it, correct?
We didn't attach it here, no. It's not attached.
And similarly, there's no evidence as to how the expenses were stabilized relative to the actual performance of the property and actual expenses leading up to the reference rate, correct?
Again, it's not attached.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So you're not in a position then to provide this board with the details of how these cap rates were derived based on what the department's giving you then. You would agree with that statement, correct?
If it's the how, it's stated in the sentence that I just read. However, if we're looking for actual income and expense information for each properties, we didn't attach it, or the department didn't attach it.
So certainly, I guess I'm suggesting, Mr. Valderrama, given that lack of evidence, there is no way for us to tell, for instance, if how, and it's a hot topic in a lot of these cases, how repairs and maintenance were stabilized, how other expenses were stabilized for any of these properties, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Lynn, do you have any questions?
No, I have no questions.
Robert?
Thank you.
No, I don't have any questions.
Thank you.
Let's move on with your presentation, Mr. Reimer.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. So actually, and again, I'm going to, if I'm going too fast at any point, because I've been told perhaps I do, please feel free to interrupt and tell me to slow down. Otherwise, I'll try and maintain a level pace, but one that's reasonable. In this case, could I ask the board members to turn to page 8 of our presentation, please? So I had suggested at the outset of this hearing that the primary issue, really the sole issue here for all intents and purposes, is cap rate. If you look at our value conclusions at line 33 concerning the net operating income, well, within $7,000 of the department's NOI. So I will simply state that if this board were inclined to use Mr. Valderrama's suggested NOI, we're so very close that in this particular case that it's not going to make a material difference. So then the issue becomes cap rate. Now, the department's applied, and Mr. Valderrama was very forthright, I appreciate his comments, as to what the department's used is the 5% as the model-driven cap rate. We're suggesting 6%. So if I could please ask Mr. Valderrama and the board members now to refer to our cap rate study that was filed in support of our hearings this morning. So in support of our 6% suggested rate, and again, I'll go through this perhaps in greater detail for the purpose of this hearing, and again ask these same comments be carried forward so we need not repeat ourselves, or I need not repeat myself. Page 1 of our cap rate study, our conclusions are set forth in that chart. So as you can see there, we've got for the older buildings pre-1946, our suggested cap rates are between 6.25 and 6.6%, depending on site-specific characteristics, location, etc. For between 46 and 59, we're suggesting 6.25. For properties with ages between 1960 and 74, we're suggesting 6%, and that's where the subject falls in. For the properties that are sort of in somewhat newer vintage, the 75 to 97, we're suggesting 5.75, and for the newer properties, 1998 plus is how we define those, we're suggesting 5.25. So on page 2, and I won't go through all of this in detail, but there's a summary there of the data and cap rates that were suggested relative to the previous cycle. And again, I'm not going to dwell on this. It provides a bit of context from last cycle to this cycle, but at the end of the day, what I'm very interested in bringing to the attention of the board is our site or our cap rate data. And so if you turn to the next page, page 3, there are a total of 9 sales on this in this document, and I'll go through them briefly. First sale at 210 St. Mary's Road. This was an apartment building with 11 suites, built in 1952, and a 3-story building that traded at a cap rate, as we calculated, of 6.26%. 403 St. Anne's, slightly newer building, 1966, 14 units, 2.5 story, and that property traded at 5.94%. I'm going to go through some of the valuations in due course, but we do know that that was a rehab. That was a property that was rehabilitated 2 years prior to the sale. So significant work done just a couple of years prior to that transaction. 155 Mighton, 1968 building, again 12 units, 2.5 stories, traded at a 6.05% cap. This was also a renovated property. 512 Balmoral, 28 units, in that case 1972, at a 6.75% cap. 215 La Vérendrye, this is a smaller building, 6 units, built in 1973 at 5.9%. 277 Langside, this is one of 3 larger buildings, 47 suites in this case. 4-story building, 1974 at 6.12%. 333 Ward, and now we're getting to the new stock. 333 Ward is a good quality building located in South Winnipeg, 103 suites, 3 stories, 2006 construction, traded for 5.13%. I do note this is the same property referred to by Mr. Valderrama. The department's calculated 5% for this property, and as I'll demonstrate with our workups, we're calculating 5.13%. 718 Beach is again a newer building, 6 units, smaller building, built in 2014 at 5.42% cap rate. And finally, the largest of our properties, and also the newest, 100 Southview, built in 2014, 148 units between 2 and 3 stories, traded at 5.59% cap rate. So based on that evidence and the best indications that we've got for rates of return that are expected for these multifamily buildings as of the reference date, we've come to the conclusions that I had set out initially and also set out in the chart beneath that sales summary. So I'd like to go through the individual properties briefly. So starting at page 6, and this is all now, these are the details, and if you recall, I had asked Mr. Valderrama about the details of the valuations, and that, in my respectful opinion, is critical to determine how one can't just put a cap rate number, in my opinion, on a page without demonstrating how it's calculated, because of course there are judgments involved in how these things are calculated, and there's no way to tell. And Mr. Valderrama the department gave him what he's got, so there's certainly no fault to Mr. Valderrama, but it certainly is based on the lack of data and the lack of evidence underlying those numbers. I'm going to suggest that limited weight should be put on them. On page 6, then starting into our detailed calculations, this is the first sale, 210 St. Mary's Road, total of 11 suites, and as you can see at the bottom, the capitalization rate that we calculate is 6.26%. The stabilized NOI, if you see on line 33, the actual NOI that was being generated by the property was very low in 15 and 16, and then finally getting up to a reasonable level in 2017 at $49,780. We've stabilized the property at $51,922. I do note, and this is going to be a sort of a theme and a point that I do want to reinforce with the board. If you look towards the top on line 3, you see the potential suite income of $78,845. That equals a average rate of $597 per suite per month. I'm suggesting, Mr. Chairman, that there is definitely a direct correlation between the rental levels and the rental rates that are being achieved for the various properties and the willingness and the demonstrated ability of the landlord to spend on ongoing repairs and maintenance for the properties. And the correlation, of course, is this. As the landlord spends greater sums of money on repairs and maintenance and keeps his building at a high level or brings it up to a higher level through increased repairs and maintenance, it's going to have an effect on the rental rate, and the rental rate is going to go up. There's essentially two fundamentally different business models with these apartments. One is to simply, this wouldn't apply to the newer buildings obviously, but to some of the buildings sort of in the 70s and earlier, a business model is to simply take the lower income and higher turnover as is and put very little money into the building and just take the take the operating income as it stands without really doing anything further. The other business model, which is many of our clients take, certainly with top tier managers, is to put a much higher degree of repairs and maintenance costs year in and year out, but then you expect a higher degree of revenue, and in most cases you will see a much higher degree of average revenue per suite. So in the case of this property, this is the former business model where it's only $600 a door and a 6.26% cap rate, but notice the repairs and maintenance is only $332 a suite, so that's the correlation there. Now if you take the next page, 403 St. Anne's, this is a 1966 vintage, and this is interesting when we've got the net operating income of $9,119, but the stabilized repairs and maintenance on line 27 is $1,003 a suite. So it's almost triple what the previous property was, but if you look again on line 3, the potential rent averages out at $828 per suite, so substantially higher per suite, per door, per month than the previous property, and again we have a cap rate there of 5.94%. Going to 155 Mighton on page 8, there we've got a cap rate of 6.05%. Again, our repairs and maintenance there was $750 a door, and the average suite revenue is $906.50 a door. So again, substantially higher than the initial property. Next page, 512 Balmoral. This is again a property. This is a 1972 vintage, and the average suite there, repairs and maintenance on line 27 is $432 a door. But again, the potential suite income is, if you look on line 3, is $567. So that's again that correlation I referred to earlier, and we calculate a cap rate here of 6.75%. 215 La Vérendrye on page 10. That is a property where it's a 1973 build, and the cap rate we calculate is 5.90%. And in this particular case, there's a very large number. It's only 6 suites, and of those 6 suites, 4 of the suites are 3-bedroom units. So the average rent, it's not there, but I've calculated the average rent is actually $1,240 per door. And that, I believe, is a function of the fact that the 2/3 of the units are 3-bedroom units in this case. So the 5.9% is what we've calculated on that property. Moving to page 11, 277 Langside. The property here, the cap rate we calculated is 6.12%. Again, it's a lower repair and maintenance per door, $469 a suite, but again, if you look at the potential rent, and again, I've calculated this, for the 47 units, the average potential rent is only $554 per door, so very much on the lower end of the scale, reflecting that business model that I referred to earlier. 333 Ward, this is the first of 3 of the newer properties, and one would expect, and as you'll see here, one would expect, and it is the case that the repairs and maintenance are on the lower side because of the newer age. Here you've got a property, again, it's newer, it's built in 2006, the average repair and maintenance is about just over $1,000 a door, $1,072 per suite, but the suite income, as you would expect for a newer property, is significantly higher at $1,298 per door. So that's a function of the location, but fundamentally the newer age of this particular property. And this is the one where we calculate 5.13% for the cap in this case. Turning to page 13, 718 Beach, another new property, one of these smaller properties, built in 2014. This is another one where 2/3 of the suites, 4 of the 6 suites are 3-bedroom and then 2 2-bedroom. And we calculate a cap rate of 5.42%. The R&M again is low, but that's a function of the newer age for this property, and as one might expect it to be. Then finally, 100 Southview Crescent on page 14. This is the largest property, 148 suites. Very, very high proportion again of 3-bedroom units. It's 83 2-bedroom, 65 3-bedroom, no bachelors, no 1-bedrooms. Again, because of the newer age, as one would expect, the repairs and maintenance is stabilized at only $600 a suite. And the average rent in this case is $1,626, so very high, again reflecting the age and the suite mix and the large units in those townhouses. So based on those and the remainder of the documents, it's all the data underlying the commentary and the calculations that we've just gone through, so I'll leave that for the board to consider. But based upon those calculations and the methodology we've employed, in the case of the subject, and going back to our page 8 in the main brief, I note that the potential rent in this case with the 1 million, and I'm at our line 3 now, the potential rent is $1,681,698, which equals a rate of $973 per door. So again, and Mr. Boardroom has alluded to this in his presentation at the higher end of the scale, and then working it down through capitalizing our suggested NOI of $824,316. We're suggesting a value this morning of $13,738,592, rounded to $13,739,000. I've also submitted an R&M study, but because it's not germane to this appeal, because of the very close proximity of our NOI calculations, I'll just save that for the first appeal where it comes up where it's more relevant. With respect to then, and again, I'd ask to file this once, and then perhaps if we can carry forward my comments to the remainder of the properties concerning the department's cap rates. There's one for each file as well.
Thank you. Thanks, Councillor.
So recall that Mr. Valderrama, the department's given Mr. Valderrama just a summary of a number of properties and a suggested cap rate for the 5 properties. We, in response to that information, we're providing this rebuttal for the board's reference relating to the purchaser's intention to renovate, and I'm on page 2 now. So we've attached a municipal board order that states that with the 4 remaining comparables, sufficient concerns were raised by the appellant on 3 of them regarding the purchaser's intention to significantly renovate or alter the structures. The appellant produced evidence from the purchasers which makes the board question the use of the purchase price and income information. The reason, of course, the business model when one's looking at some of these properties and buying it with intent to renovate, on the surface of it, it seems like an extremely low cap rate, but what the financial modeling actually suggests, if one looks at what the way that these purchasers operate, is a much different NOI based upon a post-renovated asset and a much different cap rate. So that was the principle underlying the municipal board's comments, and in the case of the properties that the department submitted for sales number 1, 2, 3, and 3, I should say, those properties, as we understand it, were purchased with intent to renovate, and the appendix attached to these comments sort of confirms that suggestion that the intent to renovate was in fact the motivation in these transactions. And that coupled with the fact that the department has chosen not to provide the detailed calculations of their NOIs and their cap rates, again, we're suggesting that very, very limited weight should be put on those transactions. There's a brief note on 333 Ward, and I've alluded to this. The department's applied or calculated a cap rate of 5%. We're suggesting 5.13% as I've gone through would be appropriate. So with that, I will conclude my comments and be pleased to answer any questions that Mr. Valderrama or the board might have. Thank you.
Mr. Valderrama, questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just on the statement with regard to R&M, increasing R&M or higher R&M, would maybe there's a correlation between R&M and the income. You mentioned earlier that if there is a higher R&M, there would be a higher revenue potentially.
Yes.
So if a building is well maintained, or should I say, not maintained well, not spending too much money on it, would you agree that a potential buyer may look at it as not as well maintained as the others that have higher R&M, and they might put little value or less value compared to something that is well maintained or being spent with a higher R&M?
No doubt, a property that is being maintained at a higher level, year in and year out with higher R&M, is going to fetch a higher sale price per door. So absolutely. And then the other comment to your question, Mr. Valderrama, when you talk about, and that's why I was talking about the purchase with intent to renovate, because the targets of, very often the target of that business model are exactly those properties that have had less done to them, because those are the best candidates for putting significant capital into it and then applying for rent exemptions from RTB. So that's sort of the way that those play out. But yes, I agree with your statement. The higher R&M and the higher maintenance year in and year out would generally fetch a higher sale price per door.
And just out of curiosity, if a potential buyer, for example, saw this potential in maybe a not well-maintained property, and they would invest more money in it, would the revenue they would get from a renovated property be almost equal to how much they're putting in, or at least will offset in the future?
So the business model, what happens is when you put a certain amount of capital in, and you then apply to and presumably are given exemptions from RTB controls for a period of time, as long as the market will bear it, then your revenue tends to go up quite dramatically. And at the same time, because if significant capital sums have been put in, then for a period of time after the rehabilitation, the repairs and maintenance expenses are typically lower. So what happens as a result of the combination of all these factors is you've got a significantly higher NOI, which generates, at the end of the day, when you take the purchase price along with that initial capital investment, it results in a very, very different and higher net operating, capitalization rate that's indicated by that revised NOI. So, I believe your question is, once the capital has been put in, does the revenue rise? And yeah, that's the business model with these properties that are purchased with intent to renovate.
So if low-maintained property is having a high capitalization rate, would that mean that it's a bit risky in terms of a potential buyer?
Well, so the capitalization rate study, as we've pointed out, you've got a range there from the brand new properties that, I'll go back to the study, in the 5% to, I'm referring now, Mr. Chairman, to page 3. So for the newer properties, which are the last three, you've got 333 Ward and 200 Southgate, it's between 5.13 and 5.59. So those are the newest, best quality buildings, and as you'd expect, they're at the lower end of the cap rate range. Then you've got a couple, the second and the third property, 403 St. Anne's and 155 Mikey. Those were older properties, but they were renovated, so that's the business model. The renovations are already done. And the rates of return that were indicated by those were in sort of 6% range. One was just under, and one was just over. For some of the remaining properties, as I alluded to, you've got much lower R&Ms, but at the same time, much lower rents, and the rates of return are generally in that, low end is 5.9%, up to a high of 6.75% for Balmoral. So the risk is a combination of different factors. It includes building condition, it includes at the end of the day, the ability of the property to maintain a rental income stream, and this is why I'm sort of stressing the rental revenue, Mr. Boardroom. When you've got the higher repairs and maintenance, the landlords will, year in and year out, maintaining it at that higher level, landlords will expect to get a higher rent, and it's that elevated higher rental income stream, in this case as well, that we're valuing. And if you expect to continue to have that higher rental income stream, you will need to keep that property in top condition with the higher R&M. So it's the risk that you're talking about. And you asked if it was higher risk, it would be, the risk is, the rates of return and the risk are well reflected in the study. And fundamentally, if you're buying a property with the intent of keeping the expenses very low and low R&M, you're not going to be valuing it using higher rents, because it's just, that would be an abnormally high risk that is likely not achievable.
That's all the questions I have, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Lynn, do you have any questions?
No, no questions.
Rob?
No, I don't have any questions, thank you.
Here, page 2 on your study.
Yes.
The 2018 Altus, and you've got the city is on the other side?
Yeah, so the 2018, which is the first half of it,
Yeah.
the red column where it
Right.
says ASSR, so that's assessor 2018 cap rates from their model.
Yeah.
And then the next column over is our suggested cap rates, so that was from last cycle. And then for 2020, you've got, again, under the red column, the department's cap rate ranges based on the model, and then our suggested ranges based on our study.
Now, you've changed it from 1975 to 1997 to 1980-97, correct?
Well, the age parameters have changed from last cycle. I think last cycle, if you look at 2018, we were just running with the age bracketing that the department was using, but we're suggesting in this case for 2020 a different age bracket as we set up there.
And what was the reason for changing that?
I cannot answer. It's, I guess the bulk of our properties, when we looked on our study, we've got one that's prior to 1960, and we've got actually 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we've got 5 that would be in the 1960 and 1974 category. And then it jumps over to the newest category, which would be 1998 plus. So I imagine that we believe it was an appropriate cutoff, but it's the exact reason for that bracket I can't tell you.
What was the expenses, did they go down or up after 1980? The percentage
Okay,
of the
so
expense?
the expenses for the newest buildings are, like this is the 98 plus, would be lower than a lot of these sort of 60s and particularly 70s vintage buildings. For 1980 plus, I guess when you start getting this is based on my experience, Mr. Chairman. When you start talking about buildings in the 90s, then they're typically in reasonable condition, and the expenses perhaps would start to move down a little bit, but these are also ones that are starting to get a little longer in the tooth as well. But certainly with the 70s and 80s vintage buildings, and the bulk of the stock, I would suggest, is sort of more in the 70s era, you've got to put significant sums of money in our suggestion to maintain them at the level that you need to generate some of these higher income streams. So all things being equal, to answer your question, expenses as the buildings get newer would move down to where you've got the buildings like Ward and Southview where they're the lowest of all. But as far as, you know, the 80 to 98 vintage, again, I would expect that trend, general trend to be there, but you're still talking about significant sums for a building that's, for instance, built in 1980. By the reference date, that building is nearly 40 years old, so you're talking about significant sums of money, I'd suggest as well.
On your page 8 of your sheet, yes, you look at the vacancies. Everything else you're using the actuals are for, are you not? On the top?
Page eight is the, so RVA, if you look at that column, that's the pro forma that we were provided by our appraisal group. So in that pro forma, the vacancy allowance there was 1.5%.
So how come, which page 8 are you on now?
Our,
Cap rate?
yes.
No, I'm on that one now. Back to your,
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
1.5% was your, right, was your vacancy. But now if you come to yours here, on your page 8 from your,
Yes, indeed.
your vacancy was running 1.8, 1.6, 1.3, and you're
Yeah.
1.6, but you're going to 2.4.
Yeah.
Why?
That, I believe, would be closer
Fair.
to the general market, but you're absolutely right. I have you're absolutely right, that's higher than the actual performance of the property.
Yeah.
The average is 1.6. Yeah,
That should probably be 1.6.
I would not disagree with that.
And then going down to your expenses,
Now, if you recall there, Mr. Chairman, and if you look at our, and again, this isn't, in this case, it's not, at the end of the day, a pronounced difference between our NOIs, but our repairs and maintenance there is based on a 5-year average. So it was, you know, significantly lower than what was happening in 16 and 17, but higher than the previous 3 years before that, from 13 to 15, so.
but it falls pretty close to the model at 40, at 50.8, it's 50.7.
Indeed, it's very close in this case, yeah.
One more question, I gotta find it.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, you may.
Okay, I'm on, back to your cap rate study.
Okay,
Sorry.
good, okay.
On your page 2, where you show the chart comparison with previous cycle?
Yes.
So you do have breakdowns, and these are for good locations, right?
Indeed, yes, that's right.
So a non-good location, there would be wiggle room?
There would be a premium that we would put on it. That would be a site-specific adjustment, typically upward.
Okay, I also see that this property is 1976, and, you know, it's kind of on the edge of one of your breakdowns in age group. I think it's
Yeah,
the third
it is.
one.
Yeah.
So do you, is there room for grays in there? Do you
There's
find?
I would agree with that, Ms. Nesbitt. There's always room for, it's not, as you can tell from the data, there's nothing that's crystal clear. But having said that, based on the data we've got, we believe we're being fair in our conclusions, but when you're saying sort of, our bracket point is 1980, and this property is getting quite close to that bracket point, so the gray would be between, in our suggestion, 5.75 and 6. I'm not disagreeing, there would be some gray there.
Okay, and so you don't just say, yeah, okay, this is a good property?
Yes.
Good.
This
Good
is one of the top.
good location,
yeah,
good building.
Good managers, yeah, absolutely.
You've inspected it, or?
I have been in it, not recently, but in the past.
Okay,
And I mean, this is a top flight manager / owner.
okay, thank you.
My last question on, we're going back to your cap rate study. I'm gonna move you around a little bit. On your page 14, on that building on Southview Crescent,
Yes.
what was the effect that it had when the vendor actually guaranteed 3 years of 95% occupancy? Wouldn't that have had an effect on that cap rate?
If the vendor is guaranteeing the occupancy, that would of course reduce the risk. So absent that guarantee, the 5.59% would have actually gone up, I'd suggest. Good point. But we're going with the 5.59%.
That would have brought the cap rate down.
Indeed, that's reducing the risk, absolutely. Yeah.
That was the only one that they did that. Okay, I've got no further questions.
Thank you all.
Let's move this stuff over. We don't take the next slide. That wasn't bad. Next property will be 1590 Henderson Highway. Mr. Valderrama, when you are ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The next property has a file number of 19-3700, has a roll number 040020271100. It is located at 1590 Henderson Highway. We're dealing with the roll year of 2020 using reference date of April 1st, 2018. Assessed value is $16,433,000. It is an apartment with 12 stories at an actual year built of 1972. Has 166 suites and an indoor parking spots of about 81. It is zoned as residential multifamily with a land area of 42,735 square feet, a planned area of 10,891 square feet, and a gross floor area of 134,335 square feet. On page 3 are some aerial photos of the subject property. On page 4 is the income valuation summary. There are 166 units with an average monthly rent per unit of $885.22 based on the model. It has a vacancy rate of 2.6%, expense ratio of 49.29%, giving it a net operating income of $870,950. Given a capitalization rate of 5.3%, the capitalized income is $16,433,019. On page 5 are some rent comparables. They're all ranging from $842 up to $970 average monthly rent per unit. On page 6 is the map of the subject property and the comparable rents. Page 7, page 8 are some capitalization rate charts. And on page 10, to the last page, is where the 2017 income and expense information is attached. That's my presentation, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Reimer, questions?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Just, Mr. Valderrama, the valuation on page 4, again, that's model driven right from top to bottom, correct?
Page 4, yes, that's correct.
It's so up to and including the potential rent, which is model driven and not site specific, correct?
That's correct.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask the previous questions on the cap rate and everything else be carried forward? And those are my questions. Thank you.
Thanks, agreed. Lynn?
I have a question on your comparables.
Go ahead, ma'am.
Just looking at your subject property, of 166 units, 163 are one-bedroom apartments.
That's correct.
And so that's, what, over 90?
Almost all of them.
Almost
Yes,
all of them.
that's correct.
Right. So none of your other comparables have that same suite mix, aside from maybe comparable number 4, which is 100%, but it's also significantly smaller.
That's correct.
Did you look outside? I know you tried to stay within the area, and I appreciate that, but did you look outside just a little bit further the neighborhood to see if you could see anything that might be a little more comparable to the subject?
Well, if we look at the comparables 2 and 3, they may not be 90% or 95%, however, they're more heavy on one-bedroom units.
Perhaps number 2 is?
2, a little bit on 3. 112 is against 189. That's the reason why it's pulling, or it has a higher average compared to the model. What model is spitting out at $885.22. Outside of the neighborhood, I think what I did here was a parameter on more on the market area, which is bigger than the neighborhood.
Okay.
And going out of the neighborhood, I didn't go that far.
Okay.
Or market region.
So you would say then, which one is your best comparable? Number 4? Number 2?
Number 2 and 3 in between, just because of the size of the building, which is 166 units total for the subject property. And in terms of how heavy it is on a one-bedroom mix, 2 and 3 maybe a little bit lighter compared to the subject, but it's still within, I would say number 2, because it has no 3-bedroom units. It has just 30 units of 2-bedroom. which is still higher or a bit
Yeah.
lower
It's
compared
about
to.
25% roughly.
Mhm, that's correct.
And despite it being 25% two-bedroom, it's still got a much lower monthly rent.
Yes, and a much lower in terms of total units, which is 133 units compared to 166 units.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Rob?
Yes, did you, this is all model driven, you said, did you override it in any sense with the income statements that we received from the owner?
No, I didn't override it, sir.
It appeared to me on the income statement from the owner, the differences are the discounts and allowances of $238,000 proposed by the owner.
Which page are you on?
Page 11?
Page 11.
The rental income is shown as 1723 as opposed to your 1763, very close
That's
on the
correct,
first
sir.
line.
That's correct,
But
sir.
the owner has indicated it's necessary for him to provide discounts and allowances in order to fill the building. $238,000. See, you just go down line 4,
Mhm,
discounts
that's right.
and allowances, $238,000. You see what I'm looking at?
Yes, that's correct. I can see that.
Which brings down the rental in revenue to $1,456,000.
And if we include it as a total revenue, it will go back up to $1,526,733 and
Because of parking and laundry, right?
Yes, that's correct, sir.
But the owner is indicating that park discounts and allowances are a factor in this building. I am assuming he's saying, and probably the accountant will provide this, he's saying that these discounts and allowances are necessary to fill the building.
I am not sure about that, sir. Without further info or statement, I wouldn't be able to verify why discounts were provided. However, it's in their income statement. So I'm not sure why they would provide such discounts.
Well, often it's moving allowances or something of that nature that
Right.
is necessary to attract tenants.
It could be, but
It certainly
I
affects his
would-
bottom line here.
That's correct. It could, yes. I'm just looking at the income statement compared. Just trying to see if there's some that sticks out. Capital expense. Yeah, I just noticed too that some capital expense is also deducted from it, which is $105,000 from the net operating income. So if we add back $105,000 to the net operating income and some other, the rehab and some other expenses, it would be around, would be close to $800,000 in terms of NOI, which we have here as $870,950 from our model.
I wasn't getting into expenses, but it just, on the revenue side,
Right.
it struck me that there's a big factor here
Yeah.
that the owner's reporting that hasn't been taken into account in the model.
No, it hasn't been taken into account, no. It's more of gross income,
Yeah.
gross revenue,
Yeah.
so we're taking into account.
Okay,
And I'm not sure if these discounts and allowances could be a one-time thing or a recurring every year. I'm not sure too, so,
okay, I'll leave it at that for now, thank you.
thank you, sir.
And I'll leave it alone for now. On with the presentation. Mr. Randall.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Okay, just have a moment, please.
Sure.
Okay. Could I ask the board members, Mr. Boardroom, to turn to our page 8, please? So, Mr. Upton was sort of alluding to the primary concern that we have in this case is actually relating to the revenue assumptions that the model has made, or that the model has generated. The actual rental revenue for the subject is substantially lower than the model-driven rent that the department's applied. So you can see, and Mr. Boardroom is exactly right, we have to include the laundry, parking, and miscellaneous income, but of course we've done that in our valuation. And if you look to our line 13, our stabilized effective gross income is $1,517,000, which is fully $200,000 less than the department's model-driven EGI of $1,717,000. So the question of discounts, and this does certainly come up periodically, where you've got a property that the landlord will always want to, on paper, ensure that the rental rates reflected for the building are the maximum rates that the RTB will allow, so that there isn't any slippage in sort of the year-over-year percentage increases that are permitted. But where you've got, and this is the case with the subject, where you've got a property that is located in a market area where the higher rents simply will not be sustainable within a given market. You show the higher face rents, but then you give the rental concessions in order to attract and retain your rental base in your building, and that's what's happening here. If you look between 2015 and 2017, the vacancy rate's actually gone from 7.6% down to 1.7%, while at the same time the gross revenue is going up substantially. But in order to maintain the income stream, what's happening as part of all of that, a significant part of this mix is the increase in the discounts. So the discounts indeed are increasing, but the happy circumstance, of course, and this is the landlord's objective, is their vacancy rates are going down. That's the primary objective first and foremost, to get the building closer to capacity. And then as the market will bear it, you can try and reduce the discounts over a period of time. This is a case where it's actually going the other direction, where the discounts are going up, the vacancy is going down, and the effect of all of that, of course, is to increase the revenue. The year-over-year on line 3, our potential market gross rents, and that's after discounts, has actually gone from $1,363,000 to $1,485,000 between 2015 and 2017. So the model is working, and in fact, when you look at the effect of the reduction in vacancy on our line 8, the effective gross rent has gone from $1,260,000 in 2015 up to $1,459,000. So that's where you start to see the effects of this strategy working out, and it is working out in this case quite well. But notwithstanding that, the potential revenue that's just generated by the model is simply much too high. It's not sustainable, not achievable by this building. And recall, Mr. Chairman, I know these board members are very familiar with it, but what we're valuing is certainly on a site-specific basis. It's all well and good for the department to apply or to bring forward the evidences to some of the other rents for other buildings, but at the end of the day, the investor is going to see that as part of the market. But what they're valuing is this income stream and this income stream on a specific basis. So then to move forward with our evaluation on line 13, then we're coming in, as you can see there, with a stabilized EGI of $1,517,231, and our expenses are actually significantly lower than the expenses on a dollar-for-dollar basis applied by the department, but the expense ratio is pretty close. We're slightly lower at 47.7% relative to the model-driven expense ratio of 49.3%. But because of that discrepancy in the top-line revenue, our NOI calculation at the end of the day is $792,853. It's about fully or almost $80,000 lower. And again, we're suggesting a cap rate, in this case based on the cap rate study, of 6%, coming in at a value of $13,214,000. If I could ask the board to carry forward my comments on the cap rates from the previous property, and those would be my comments. Thank you.
Mr. Dollar, any questions?
Just same questions that I had with respect to the cap rates. So.
Okay. Rob, questions?
I don't think so, thank you.
Lynn?
Nope.
The rent rolls that you provided,
Yes.
are those discounted then? Numbers?
No. Just scanning through this. No, these look like the face rents because there's no discount shown on the rent roll.
You didn't give us any comparables the way the city did for rates in
No,
the
actually
area?
not. We're valuing it on a site specific, yeah.
Looking at the city's comparables that they gave, following up on questions of one of my panel members, The 1335 Henderson property is probably the closest one. It's a 1970. It's coming at 856. If you're using that 856, 860 range, is that not bringing it very close to your number?
Close to my number. Sorry, you lost me there, Mr. Chairman.
What's your rent? If you take,
If you take the rent, after discounts, so, look, on page 8, or on line 3, the 1,045,612.
Yep.
That should be $746 a door after discounts.
746.
Yeah. Now, the face rent, was of course significantly higher, but
That's the discounted.
that's after discounts.
But it's coming in, the effective gross income of 1,517,000
Okay.
on your line 13.
Yeah, 1517231 divided by, I think, about 160.
That's showing the parking and everything else.
Yeah.
So if you take that 1,517,000, that's probably putting you closer to that 8.
No, I'm still only then at 771. But again, and I stress this, what we're talking about is a site-specific valuation, Mr. Chairman. You know, especially in the context of the environment in which these these multifamily properties operate. An investor will certainly be interested in what the market's doing to the extent that they might forecast that maybe in the future if the market's going to bear it, their discounts are going to be able to go down. But that's not what's happening here. So it's all well and good to say these are the other buildings, but what we don't know is, are there discounts being applied? These again will be, I'm imagining, Mr. Boardroom, correct me if I'm wrong, but these will be the face rates, and we don't know if there was discounts applied to any of those to come in at lower rates. But certainly what we do know is that in the case of the subject, in order to start filling it up and bringing up the potential income to what it is, significant discounts had to be offered for the reasons, the strategic reasons I mentioned. So.
Are they doing a rehabilitation on this building at this time?
Not gauging, there's certainly some capital being put into it, but not given it's a very large building, and when you're talking sort of about 100,000 or 150,000 and what they're listing as capital, it's not significant.
Their vacancies, 2015, 2016, 7.65%. Wasn't until they started giving their discounts that they got it down to the 1.7 and 17.
Exactly.
Now that it's been corrected, are they, because, I mean, their profit, their total rent's only got up by $40,000. Their income.
40, how do you mean? Because the rent would.
In 2016, their income was $1,441,000.
Oh, that would be between 16 and 17.
Yeah, and then 17, it's $1,485,000. That's after they've given the discounts. Yes, they brought their vacancy down to 1.7,
But
their actual income hasn't gone up.
Yeah, no, actually it's gone up quite a bit. If you look at line 8, line 8 is the key, because a part of the linchpin in this is the vacancy rate, right?
Yeah.
That's the strategy. So the income has gone in 2016, the income went from 1,363,000 up to 1,459,000, so it actually almost went up 100 grand. Because that's a key part of this whole strategy, is to provide the discounts to get the vacancy rates down and get the building filled up. So, and of course, it's even more pronounced when you look at the effective gross income, because now you've got additional laundry income, additional parking income.
So should we not be using $1,529,000 because now that we've made those adjustments, we're truly at that $1,529,000?
Oh, if one were inclined to use 1,529,000, we stabilized it using as you can see there, we stabilized it using 1,045,000 and then 2.6%, rather than the actual 17 at 1.7%. We used a market of 2.6, and the difference on line 13 is ours stabilized as 1,517,000 versus 1,529,000. If you're inclined to use 1,529,000, I mean, that's certainly open for the board to make that decision. Now, recall though, we were doing a bunch of stabilizing, so the actual NOI in 2017 was 776. Our stabilized NOI is still higher still. It's at 792,853 because of some differences in the stabilizing relative to the actual 2017. So.
Okay. Further questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, may I request a 5-minute recess?
You may, and we'll give it to you. We're gonna now be dealing with 351 Tupelo Avenue. When you are ready, Mr. Valderrama.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The next one is a file number 19-4150. Has the roll number of 0400275800. It is located at 351 Tupelo Avenue. We're dealing with the roll year of 2020 using reference date of April 1st, 2018. The assessed value is $13,682,000. It is apartments or resac. Has 2 buildings, 3 stories, actual year built of 1986. It has 108 suites with 108 outdoor parking. It is zoned as residential multifamily with a land area of 144,392 square feet, a planned area of 35,898 square feet, and a gross floor area of 105,448 square feet. On page 3 are some aerial photos of the subject property. And on page 4 is the income valuation summary. There are 108 units with an average monthly rent per unit of $1,013.39. It has a vacancy rate of 2.6%, expense ratio of 46.52%, giving it a net operating income of $684,119. With a capitalization rate of 5%, the capitalized income is $13,682,380. On page 5 are some rent comparables. They are all ranging from $976 up to $1,101 average monthly rent per unit. On page 6 is the map of the subject property and comparable rents. Page 7, page 8 are the cap rate schedules or charts. On page 10, to the last page, is the 2017 income and expense information. And that's my presentation, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Reimer.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Valderrama, on page 4 again, so this is a model-driven evaluation from top to bottom, correct?
That's correct.
And reference was not had to the actual site-specific performance of the property arriving at the value, correct?
Correct.
Mr. Chairman, could I ask that the previous questions on CAP be asked and answered? Thank you.
Agreed. Lynn, any questions?
I'm just looking again at your rent comparables and the map. So these are quite a distance away. You have 3 of the 4 are on Henderson, probably your previous ones as well, right?
Correct.
And Tupelo is kind of on that east side of Gateway Avenue.
That's correct.
Did you look in the neighborhood for something?
I tried to expand it in the market region, and they are all within the market region.
Nothing
I
in it?
do think that almost all influences are pretty much similar,
Okay.
and that's the reason
So which
why I
one
took them.
is your best?
Next one. I'm just looking at some of the mix in here. I would say probably the looking at the average floor area of 976. I would say either 2 or 3.
Okay. Okay, so 2 and 3 have their heat in the rent. What about the subject?
We are using gross potential rent on this one, so
Okay.
it would include the rent, the heat in the rent.
It does, okay. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Rob?
Again, you didn't override the model with the information.
No, I did not, sir.
You used strictly model, right? Okay.
Yes, that's correct.
We heard from that from Mr. Reimer, probably. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Reimer, on with your presentation.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. If I could ask the board members, Mr. Valderrama, to turn to page 8 then. On page 8, and again, we are indeed, as Mr. Upton's alluded to, we are indeed that the only reasonable approach is to value the property using site-specific information, and that's been reinforced by the municipal board that the site-specific valuation needs to be done, and that's what we've done in this case. If you look at our line 13, we're actually higher by about just under 20 grand on the effective gross income. So in this case, the reason for our lower NOI at the bottom of the calculation is that the expenses that we've applied are higher at 655, 356, and that results, as you can see there, in an NOI of 643, 233, which is about $40,000 lower than the department's model-driven NOI. And for the reasons set forth in our cap rate study, we're suggesting 5.75%. So within the repairs and within the expenses, as you can see on line 27, we used a stabilized repair and maintenance amount of 149,610, which is the average of the 3-year period between 15 and 17. So for those reasons, and looking at the site-specific information for the property, we're suggesting a value of $11,187,000 and ask the board to order accordingly. Thank you.
Mr. Valderrama, any questions?
Just out of curiosity, does the repair and maintenance include replacements of some appliances, or are they separate?
The repairs and maintenance. I'm going to go to, if we go, Mr. Chairman, to page 20 of our brief, starting at page 20. So I can tell you, now I don't know, Mr. Valderrama, I'm going to make some assumptions about your question, and if I haven't answered the question, let me know. So on the under expenses, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, seventh line, it's equipment replacement. We have not included that in our R&M figure. The next 2 down from that is refurbishment of 44,221. That is not included in our R&M calculation. So I believe those are the 2 items we're talking about, and in our summary, we have not put those into the R&M figures.
That's all the questions I have, Mr. Chair.
Lynn, any questions?
So I calculate an average R&M of $13.85 per unit. Does that sound reasonable?
I apologize, I should have that number on
That's
there.
okay.
I'll take a quick
I just used the stabilized number.
149,612. 1385?
Yep.
Yes, indeed.
Okay, and is that a reasonable number given the age of the property, or?
I'm going to suggest very much so. In fact, we have a lot of examples. This gets to the point, Ms. Nesbitt, your question's a good one. This gets to the point where we're talking about the income streams that are at the sort of approaching the higher end for this vintage buildings. Typically, it's been my experience that you will get a range anywhere between, depending on the individual building, the age and the condition, between $1,200 and it can actually go upwards of $1,800 or $2,000 a suite at the very top end. So 1385 would be, from what I've seen, towards the lower end. Now, this is a 1986 building, so the buildings I'm talking about are in that 12 to 2,000 range, are typically sort of late 60s, 70s vintage. So the 1385 for something that's a little bit newer by perhaps 10 years or so, that makes sense to me. And as I say, we haven't included those capital items that Mr. Waldrath asked about. Those, to be clear, those numbers are not included in our R&M amounts shown on page 8.
Okay, thank you.
And I've had no questions.
Thank you.
Questions? Just
Not for me.
I thought it asked Rob already. None for you, Rob? Good. That'll conclude that matter. We'll move on to 1792 Henderson Highway. When you're ready, Mr. Valderrama.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The next property has a file number 19-2984. Has a roll number 0400174590. It is located at 1792 Henderson Highway.
I think this one we're just dealing with cap rate on it.
That's it.
We are indeed, that's exactly right.
Okay, I'll just go through it.
Go through it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we're dealing with the roll year of 2020, using reference date of April 1st, 2018. The assessed value is $8,725,000. It is a res app or apartments with 3 buildings, 3 stories, actual year built of 1984. It has 84 suites and 94 outdoor parking. It is zoned as residential multifamily with a land area of 107,611 square feet, a planned area of 25,130 square feet, and a gross floor area of 75,390 square feet. We've got some aerial photos of the subject property on page 3, and the income valuation summary on page 4, using model parameters. We have it at an average monthly rent of $901.67. Has a vacancy rate of 2.6%. Expense ratio of 50.72%, giving the net operating income of $436,252. Using a capitalization rate of 5%, the capitalized income is $8,725,040. On page 5 are some rent comparables. They're all ranging from $903 up to $1,086 average monthly rent per unit. Page 6 is the map of the subject property and comparable rents. Page 7 and 8 are some capitalization charts, capitalization rate charts. And on page 10, to the last page, is the 2017 income and expense information. And that's my presentation, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Reimer?
So again, Mr. Boardroom, the evaluation is model driven, top to bottom, including cap, right?
That's correct.
Questions asked and answered, please, Mr. Chairman, if I could, and that's it. Thanks.
Thank you. Lynn, question?
No questions.
Robert?
No, none for me, thank you.
None for me. On with your presentation, and
Very-
Mr. Reimer?
Thank you. Very briefly, please, on page 8. Mr. Chairman, the issue is exactly as you framed it. We're within, our NOI is actually a wee bit higher than the departments. We're within $2,000, so that effectively this is a cap rate discussion, and we're asking for the reasons given on our cap rate study. We're asking for 5.75%. That results in a value of $7,630,000. Thank you.
Mr. Valderrama, any questions?
No questions, Mr. Chair.
Lynn?
No questions.
Rob?
No questions for me.
The only question I had was on your vacancy. Why did you go to 5.2? Usually you've been going to the max that the city had at 2.6. And this one you carried it forward at 5.2.
Yeah, this was a property where the vacancy was actually increasing, so we thought the 3-year stabilized average was appropriate at 5.2, given that trend.
It increased in the 1 year. Going to
Actually,
3.5, yeah,
Yeah.
went up.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank
No
you.
further questions? That concludes the matter. That was too quick. Next item on the docket is 1600 Henderson Highway. Mr. Valderrama, when you are ready.
Next property has a file number 19-3707. Has a roll number 04-002-023-000. It is located at 1600 Henderson Highway. We're dealing with the roll year of 2020 using reference date of April 1st, 2018. The property is assessed at $8,038,000. It is residential apartments with 11 buildings, 1 to 2 stories, with an actual years built of 1971 to 1972. There are 64 suites and 97 indoor parking. It is zoned as residential multifamily with a land area of 91,371 square feet, planned area of 45,098 square feet, and a gross floor area of 79,357 square feet. On page 3 is the map or the aerial photo of the subject property. On page 4 is the income valuation summary. We have 64 total units with an average monthly rent per unit of $1,123.06. A vacancy of 2.6%. expense ratio of 49.29%, giving it a net operating income of $426,007. With a capitalization rate of 5.3%, the capitalized income is $8,037,868. On page 5 are some rent comparables. They're all ranging from $1,101 up to $1,434 average monthly rent per unit. On page 6 is the map of the subject property and comparable rents. Page 7 and 8 are capitalization rate charts. And beginning page 10 up to the last page is the 2017 income and expense information for the subject property. And that's my presentation, Mr. Chair.
Any questions, Mr. Ryman?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I'll frame the questions by indicating that cap rate is again the only issue. So Mr. Valderrama, again, the valuation talked about, specifically including cap rate, that's model driven, correct?
Correct.
Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Lynn?
Nope.
Robert?
I don't think I have any, thank you.
How did you drive your expense ratio of 44% when you were looking at an average of 47.6?
Which, oh, sorry.
Where?
Oh, I'm so, where, oh, was that a question to me?
Oh, I guess no.
Wrong one.
I shouldn't be looking at both at the same time. Because he's got 49. No, I'm good. On with your presentation, Mr. Ryman.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Page 8, please, if we could. So as I indicated, our NOI actually in this case is $13,000, almost $14,000 higher than the department's model-driven NOI. Using again the site-specific information that we've got, and the NOI we've derived is $439,993 is shown on line 33, and we're suggesting a cap rate of 6% in this case for the reasons given earlier in our cap rate study, and that comes in at $7,333,000. Mr. Chairman, I'm going to anticipate your question now. As far as the 44% stabilized ratio, you'll note that our repairs and maintenance stabilized amount is actually the average of the 3 lower years. That would be 13, 15, and 16. That we believe was reasonable in this case, and that's how we derived our NOI that we've got there. Thank you.
You said 13?
Yes.
You don't have 13 on this.
Yeah, the 142,000. So.
Oh, over here, okay.
Yeah, the 142,000 is 2013, and then 213,000 is 2014, but we haven't used that. And then 15 and 17, or 16, I should say.
Okay. Mr. Valderrama, any questions?
No questions, Mr. Chair.
Lynn?
No.
Robert?
No, I don't think so, thank you.
And I'm good. Seeing as you answered my question already. We're now dealing with 1770 Henderson Avenue. When you are ready, Mr. Valderrama?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Next one is a file number 19-2982. It has a roll number 0400143540. It's located at 1770 Henderson Highway. We're dealing with the roll year of 2020 using reference date of April 1st, 2018. The assessed value is $7,365,000. It is a residential apartment with 2 buildings and 3 stories. It has an actual year built of 1984 with 72 suites and 94 outdoor parking. It is zoned as a residential multifamily with a land area of 77,895 square feet, a planned area of 21,100 square feet, and a gross floor area of 63,534 square feet. Page 3 are some aerial photos of the subject property. On page 4 is the income valuation summary. There are 72 units with an average monthly rent per unit of $887.93, which is a model-derived parameter. It has a vacancy rate of 2.6%, an expense ratio of 50.72%, giving it a net operating income of $368,233. With a capitalization rate of 5%, the capitalized income is $7,364,000. $1,660. On page 5 are some rent comparables. They're all ranging from $903 up to $1,001 average monthly rent per unit. On page 6 is the map of the subject property and comparable rents. Page 7 and 8 are the capitalization rate charts. Page 10 is the 2017 income and expense information for the subject property. And that's my presentation, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Reimer, any questions?
And again, Mr. Valderrama, this is model driven top to bottom, correct?
Page 4, yes, correct.
Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Rob? Any
I have
questions?
no questions, thank you.
Lynn, any questions?
No, I haven't.
On with your presentation, Mr. Reimer?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Page 8, please. So in this case, Ms. Nesbitt asked a good question earlier about the range. This, in the case of the subject property, the line 13, our effective gross income is actually just a touch higher than the department, so we're within very, very close proximity there. The difference, though, in our calculation of our stabilized NOI relates to the expenses that we've applied, and within that expense calculation, the key is the repairs and maintenance on line 27. So what you can see there is, and again, I apologize, Mr. Chairman, I don't have the year label, but the $151,883, which is the very left-hand number, that's 2013. 336,214, that's 2014, and then as you see there. So it's a significant variation from a low of 116,199 up to a high of 336,000, which we're going to suggest the 336,000 and the 236,000 would have some capital in there, and certainly we have not referenced those in our calculations. What we've done is stabilize the expense amount of 146,900. That is based on the average of the three lowest years, that's 2013, 2015, and 2017. That comes in at $2,040 a door, and as I had indicated earlier in response to Ms. Nesbitt's question, that is admittedly at the very top of the range, but we suggest, based upon what's actually happening with the property, that that's an appropriate stabilized amount, and again, given the nature of this asset. So the NOI we calculated on line 33 is $316,768. That is roughly $50,000 lower than the department's model-driven NOI, and we're suggesting a cap rate in this case of 6% to come in at a value of $5,279,000. Just a quick note, as I suggested earlier, our potential market growth rent on line 3, that equals a average suite rate of $911, which again is at the, now you're starting to talk about an income stream at the upper end of the range, and that, in order to maintain that, this is where the correlation, pardon me, with the ongoing repairs and maintenance comes in, and I suggest the two certainly are correlated in this case. We've also got a significant vacancy issue. It had gone from 6.7% up to 15%, but at the end of the day, we've applied 8% and we're coming in at the same effective gross income, 8% being at the sort of very low end, closer to what was happening in 2015, but we certainly believe our NOI calculation in all of the circumstances is appropriate and ask the board to order accordingly. Thank you.
Questions, Mr. Valderrama?
Just a quick one. Vacancy has been going up for this property. Is there any recent renovations being done, especially in 2017?
I've asked, and this is a client I know well, and your question's a good one, Mr. Valderrama, because my question always is when I see things like this, is it the fact that the market is it the fact that your suites are becoming vacant and then you take the opportunity to do some refreshing, or is it a case where you are deliberately employing a strategy which would have the effect of increasing your vacancy rate and then doing the refreshing and some of that work? The response this client consistently gives and gave in the case of this property is it's the market that it's not a case where they're employing a strategy to increase the vacancy to get some of the work done more quickly. It's as tenants move out, as dictated by the marketers and their preferences, that's when they take the opportunity to fix it up. But it isn't a case of vacancy following that strategy. It's a case of the vacancy arising and then they take advantage of it and try and refresh it to ultimately get the building filled up again. So it's not vacancy, it's the vacancy that comes first, and then they do the renovations and the work in an attempt to try and get, retain or attract tenants back.
do renovation, would it be quickly occupied?
It would be more
Faster.
quickly, absolutely. But then, of course, you're not gonna get the same elevated income stream. You're gonna start, slipping on the income. Hence my comment, Mr. Valderrama, about maintaining a higher level, a higher income stream.
Questions, Mr. Chair?
Lynn?
So why is there high vacancy in this property?
Again, the quick answer I'm giving, the vacancy ultimately is a function of the market's preferences for this particular property. But there is going to be, because they're taking advantage of the people moving out and doing the refreshing, right? So there's gonna be a lag where the vacancy rate's gonna be higher than it otherwise would be if you just do a quick carpet clean and get them back
So
in.
what is it about this property, you say the market's preference with this property? I don't understand what that means.
Well, that means that for whatever reason, tenants that are there are not happy with what's either the way the building's being operated or maintained, and they're moving out.
Is there
Again, the
anything
question,
specific that you're aware of? that's-
there's nothing, there's no specific item, a big hot topic lately, sort of, the worst case scenario would be something like bed bugs or something like that. There's nothing like that I'm aware of coming through here.
Okay.
But certainly the vacancy is an issue.
Yeah, that's quite high.
It is, I agree with you.
Yeah. But you're, okay.
And then again, of course, because they're taking advantage of and doing some of the refreshing, it's gonna stay higher for a little bit longer, right? So that when you look at the 11.8 and the 15%, that's why we've used 8%, because there is certainly an element, as I mentioned to Mr. Boardroom, an element where there's a lag because of the additional time needed to get the suite to where they want it to be so that they can attract and retain those tenants that are willing to pay those amounts.
Hence the high R&M per unit.
The higher, exactly right, that's exactly right.
Okay, thank you.
Rob?
Yeah, $2,000 a suite seems high for R&M.
It is at the upper end, yeah.
Does that fit with your comparisons between rent and maintenance?
It does, but it's at, I mentioned to Ms. Nesbitt, this is at the top end. $2,000 is at the very top end. Now, I haven't alluded to it yet, but this is a good time to do it. We've got a repairs and maintenance study, and I'm not gonna go into all the details of it, but I would ask the board then and Mr. Valderrama, and I'm gonna simply go on the summary chart on page 1. Everything that's behind page 1 of this study are the details relating to the chart set out on page 1. So I'll leave that for the board to consider. But the key being this, if you look at that chart on page 1, as you would, the general trend certainly as you would expect is that where you've got, the older the building is, the higher the average repair and maintenance is. And when you've got a renovated property within the same age bracket, you would expect that the repairs and maintenance will be less than a property within that same age bracket that hasn't been renovated, and that's typically what we're seeing here. So the key, and this is, I guess, to both Mr. Upton's and Ms. Nesbitt's, I apologize, Ms. Nesbitt, I should have brought this up when you had asked at the last hearing, the last property. The key is on that average chart, the second blue column, the Altus stabilized R&M per suite. So now there is some stabilizing that we've done, but there you can see the range that for the newer buildings, as one would expect, you've got 1998 plus renovated, the low is $667 per suite. But then for the remaining properties, sort of the vintages that we're looking at here, it ranges from $1,126 all the way up to $2,343 for the garden style. And this property would fit more closely with the garden style. If you look to our, Mr. Waldron, I think also has it in his briefs, but if you look to our page 1 now, which has got a straight view of the subject. So, we're talking about separate buildings on the, several different buildings on the lot, and sort of these three-story structures. So the closest approximation would be to garden style, but again, the range there is from the low of 11, I think I suggested 1,200, but this chart would indicate sort of closer to 1126 up to the high of 2343. So absolutely no doubt about it that this R&M we're suggesting at $2,040 per door is towards the upper end of that range. But again, when one looks at, I guess I'm now back on page 8, if you look at our stabilized NOI at line 33, we're at $360,768. That certainly is most consistent with the 2015 NOI. It dropped considerably in 16 and 17, but especially for 16, that was because of the $236,000 repair and maintenance bill, which would be, much higher still, that we didn't think was appropriate. That'll include some capital, we just didn't refer to that in our calculations. So that's how we got our number, and the $2,000 is at the upper. Consistent with our study, but certainly at the upper.
Thank you.
Does this building still fall under the RTV then, or are they trying to bump them up? Because
No, I believe it would.
they're at about $1,000 and about $1,100 a suite, right?
I have 911 per door. So if you
911.
take on our page 8.
Oh, you're 749?
Yeah, the 786,809.
Yeah.
So if you take 786, make sure I got my calculations right. 786, 809, and we have
72 units, right?
Yeah, I get $911 a door.
Got any further questions?
Thank you.
We'll move on to 1790 Henderson Highway. When you are ready, Mr. Valderrama.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The next property has a file number 19-2983. It has a roll number 0400208430. It is located at 1790 Henderson Highway. We're dealing with the roll year of 2020 using reference date of April 1st, 2018. The assessed value is $11,650,000. It is a residential apartment with one building, 7 stories, with an actual year built 1984. It has 96 suites with 105 outdoor parking. It is zoned as residential multifamily, has a land area of 71,610 square feet, a planned area of 12,971 square feet, and a gross floor area of 19,797 square feet. On page 3 are some aerial photos of the subject property. On page 4 is the income valuation summary. It has 96 units with an average monthly rent per unit of $1,006.22. A vacancy rate of 6.32%. With an expense ratio of 46.52%, giving it a net operating income of $580 and $580,743. With a capitalization rate of 5%, it has a capitalized income of $11,614,860. On page 5 are some rent comparables. They are ranging from $976 up to $1,101 average monthly rent per unit. On page 6 is the map of the subject property and comparable rents. And on page 7 and 8 are capitalization rate charts. On page 10 is the 2017 income and expense information, and that's my presentation, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Reimer, questions?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Valderrama, again, this is a model-driven valuation without reference to the actual performance of the property, correct?
Correct.
And the cap rate is also model-driven.
Correct.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Those are my questions.
Rob, any questions?
No, I don't think so right now, thank you.
Lynn,
No.
on with your presentation, Mr. Reimer.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Page 8, please. So, in this case, on row 13, our effective gross income is actually very, very close to that calculated by the department, where at $1,060,867, that's about 25,000 less than the model-driven GI, so within a reasonable proximity there. However, we're significantly higher, as you can see, on line 31 with our total expenses, and this again reflects a repairs and maintenance stabilized amount of $192,000. That's based on the maximum, in my respectful opinion, the maximum that I would typically apply per suite, which is $2,000 or in that neighborhood. So I've applied in this case $2,000 per suite to suggest the stabilized R&M of $192,000. That in turn leads to total expenses of $607,545, which results in a NOI of $453,322. That capped at 5.75% for the reasons I provided earlier in the cap rate study results in a value of $79,883. So I do note the NOI calculated on line 33 or stabilized amount of $453,322 is substantially higher than any of the years leading up to the reference date. That is a function of primarily a lower stabilized R&M amount, and of course the increase in the rental revenues, which is factored into our equation. So it's just that the value be reduced accordingly. Thank you.
Mr. Valderrama, questions?
Yes, Mr. Chair. On line 5, again, the vacancy percentage is high on this one.
It is indeed.
It seems like same case as the previous property.
Yeah, I would. It's the same, actually the same owner. So yes, we've applied 10% instead of the 14.5%, but I would agree that this vacancy rate is significantly, it seems very elevated between 13.6 and 16.6.
And induced by both market and renovation.
No, that was my point earlier, Mr. Valderrama. It's the market, it's the tenants leaving that creates the opportunity for the renovations, but it's not the landlord making deliberate decisions to move tenants out so they can do it. It's
No.
a function of renovations
Right.
following the vacancy, not
Yeah.
the other way around.
Yeah, and I asked earlier that if there was no renovation done, they could have addressed the vacancy sooner.
They certainly could have, but I'm suggesting, I guess, that they wouldn't maintain the rental revenue then. Then they would start to get slippage on the rental revenue.
And so they won't be able to change their contract and increase their rents from one tenant to another.
No, like in terms of getting out from under rent controls?
No, not rent controls, but an older rent may be a bit lower than whatever's existing during the time that the tenant left the unit.
Well, certainly, with the guidelines in the market that's in place, I don't think they're going to be, sorry, I might be misunderstanding the question. Suggesting they'd be able to start really increasing the rent significantly? No, because then they're going to create even more vacancy.
No, but within the RTB rules.
Right, yeah.
Which every year increases by
Oh, sure,
couple
yeah,
percent.
yeah, sure, yeah, absolutely.
Okay. I think that's all the questions I have, Mr. Chair.
Lynn?
No, I just note that in 2016, under your R&M line, that was quite a bit higher.
It was indeed, it was, yeah, and that to me, Mr. Chairman, Ms. Nesbitt's question is a good one. That's why we looked at 192,000, because 263 is not sustainable over the long term. Absolutely not.
Okay, so, but you did include it in your average?
No,
Oh,
actually,
you did not.
see if you look, that's a very good question. Mr. Chairman, if you look at the average for 2015 to 2017, it's 209,000. So we
Oh,
actually,
okay.
you know what I mean? So we went down to the 192 as representing the 2,000 per door
So
maximum.
you did include it in your 3-year average?
That it would be right,
At
but it's not the
209?
stabilized average, yeah.
And then you looked past that to
Exactly.
5-year to bring
Yeah.
it down?
Yeah.
Not really much of a question, just an acknowledgement, I guess.
Yeah.
Rob?
I didn't get a chance to look at their expenses here, but there's no capital involved in that 192, to your knowledge?
The 192 is, the premise of the 192 is that the 2,000 per door wouldn't include capital, but Ms. Nesbitt's question is a good one, because for instance, the 263,000 in 2016, the implication of what we're doing with our stabilizing is that there's about 70,000 in capital included in that figure. So when you look at some of these higher numbers, the 206,000, the 263, We are certainly assuming that there is an element of capital in there.
So you just selected 2,000 a door
Yeah,
out of your previous information about
exactly.
rental versus
Yeah, being at
maintenance?
the top end of the door, instead of the 209,000, which is the 3-year average. And actually, I wonder if I calculated the 5-year average, I may have.
194,068.
Thank you. Indeed, the 5-year average, just for the, and Mr. Lorndell's exactly right, the 5-year average is $194,068.
So Chair, if I, just a clarification or
Sure, go ahead.
some, a bit of enlightenment. So if there is a renovation that was done in a certain unit or number of units, for example, due to tenants leaving, would an apartment, a typical apartment, be still under the RTB, or they can apply for an exemption?
If it's just a couple of units, it's not going to be sufficient for anything significant with RTD.
So there's
So if you've
a
got
minimum
significant-
number of,
Well, if you,
units.
I believe if you've got a significant, if it's the type of project and of significant value that the RTD would see it at, because there's substantial cost involved in the nature of the work done, that it would be, or I should say, it would be appropriate to grant an exemption, then it will happen. But when we're talking, that's of course, in your example, Mr. Boardroom, like replacing carpeting in 1 or 2 suites or replacing appliances in 1 or 2 suites, that's not gonna do it. It's gotta be substantial work.
In this case, it's about 14 or 15% every year. So 14, 15%
Sorry, of what?
vacancy, the vacancy percentage is about
13,
14,
yeah, 13 to
13%,
16, yeah. Yeah.
So that's about more than 9 units right there. So would they?
But I'm not assuming that every unit's being rehabbed, if that's the assumption you're making. The vacancy is high, and I agree with that, but I'm not making a leap based on the, the R&M per suite, that there's significant rehab being done. Because don't forget, Mr. Valderrama, we're talking about an assessment of a property that's 11.6 million, and we're talking about repairs and maintenance expenses that, granted, some years are higher, but we're not talking about R&M of what's classified in R&M of $500,000 or $700,000. It's between $130,000 and $263,000 at the very highest year. So we're not disputing that above $192,000, which is $2,000 per door, there's going to be some capital in there. But those amounts, sort of 30,000, in some years it's less than that, but in some years over the 192, it's 30 or 40,000. That's not a substantial capital project that would typically trigger an exemption through the RTB. It's just not. It's not a significant enough expense in an 11.6 million building.
So would you would you know if what's the minimum amount or minimum number of units? No. That's all the questions I have, Mr. Chair.
I have one other question.
Go ahead, Rob.
I'm curious that you give a cap rate of 5.75 on this one. The previous one, also with
5.75.
Henderson, was 6%. You
Are they the
advertised
same
it
vintage?
much.
Did I misapply?
Same vintage.
So this is an
1984.
84.
I wondered, this is 7-story and the other one was maybe 3-story or something.
Oh, okay, well,
Is that why it was?
we do have a distinction, actually, that's a very good point. We have a distinction between high-rise and low-rise.
Is that what it was? Yeah, I thought it might be.
But let me, before I jump to that. I'm going to suggest, and I'm looking for something specific, I know that we have certainly drawn a distinction between the high-rise and low-rise, but our summary chart does not show that. But I am certainly familiar enough with these documents that we've presented that was a distinction that we've made. So I'm going to suggest to you, that's a very good question, and I should have picked up on that. I'm going to suggest it is, in this case, the 575 is a function of the asset in the high-rise. Okay, the 5+ stories. Yeah.
Thank you.
Let's go to your maintenance study report on your page 1.
Okay.
High-rise 1980 to 1997. 11 stabilized at what? 1126 a day?
Yes. And the renovated is 1471. That's actually one that bucks the trend that I was talking about earlier, where you would expect the renovated buildings to be at a lower amount,
Mhm.
and they're not.
But you're at 2,000.
I am at the higher end. So when you look at the high rise, there's only one, well, put it this way, there's only one property so far in the study of the high rise 1980 to 97 that hasn't been renovated. You see the number of properties, average is the one, so it's just the one there. The average of the renovated, what we consider renovated is 3, and the actual was over $2,000, but we've stabilized it at $1,471.
But
So in this case, this again was done, these are averages, and again, I'm going on a site-specific basis, and so now I'm going from this summary to the page 8. The 192,000 is lower, significantly lower than 3 of the 5 years, and will be reasonably optimistic about the ongoing R&M figure based on the 5-year numbers. But it absolutely, it's higher than the average shown in that summary. You're right.
so what's driving the higher expense? If you're gonna use actuals, what's driving the actual higher expense?
There's a couple of things. The vacancy in this case is higher, so they are taking, as these vacancy rates are higher and the suites are empty, they are taking the time to spend the money to refresh the units so that they're gonna be able to attract and ultimately get the vacancy down. So that's
So shouldn't part of that be capital?
well, part of it will be capital, and part of it will be R&M. It's not just across, like if you paint 2 suites, that, I don't consider that capital, that's not, okay? But, so there is an element of that, and other than that, it's just a function of the age of the building and the ongoing maintenance that's necessary. The lowest of the 5 years was 135,000. You know, there were 2 years, 2013 and 2015, where it was between 135 and 150,000. But again, just to keep this building operating and notwithstanding the vacancy, to try and keep it operating at a reasonably profitable level, these are the actual amounts that the landlord's choosing to spend, and hopefully ultimately to get the building to perform better. But there's no doubt, I mean, it's, as we've alluded to, the vacancy rate is higher than what would typically be found, but it's the goal here of this landlord is ultimately to be to spend the money to get the vacancy down and to get the income stream up and to retain those tenants and keep them around.
So you're showing repairs and maintenance at 192,000, correct?
Yes, indeed.
If we go to his sheet on page 29, his financial statement for 2015, it was 149,000, is that correct?
Right.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, where are you now?
The last page, it's showing
Of-
2015.
Of Mr. Boardroom's or my brief?
Yours.
Oh, okay.
I'm looking for the one that's got 2016.
Okay, so the 2016, if you go to our page 19,
Okay, it's the other side of me. Yep,
so there's the 17 and 16 numbers side by side, and the maintenance in 17 was 215,000, and in 16 it was 263,445.
'15 was what?
15, if you go to the very last page,
Yep.
page 29,
Was it
15 is the maintenance item there of 149,465.
Right.
Major improvements are not included in that.
I got no further questions.
Yep.
And I do believe this is the last one at 21 Antrim Road. When you're ready, Mr. Valderrama.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Last one in the docket has a file number of 19-3584. It has a roll number of 040052747700. It is located at 21 Antrim Road. We're dealing with the roll year of 2020 using a reference date of April 1st, 2018. The assessed value is $10,838,000. It is a residential apartment with 4 buildings and 2 stories with an actual year built of 1974. It has 88 suites with 94 outdoor parking stalls. It has a zoning of residential multifamily. It has a land area of 122,014 square feet, a planned area of 33,672 square feet, gross floor area of 86,832 square feet. On page 3 are a couple of aerial photos of the subject property. Page 4 is the income valuation summary. There are 88 units with an average monthly rent per unit of $1,101.27. It has a vacancy rate of 2.6%, an expense ratio of 49.29%, giving it a net operating income of $574,395. With a capitalization rate of 5.3%, the capitalized income is $10,837,642. On page 5 are some rent comparables. They're all ranging from $1,101 up to $1,434 average monthly rent per unit. On page 6, the map of the subject property and comparable rents. Page 7 and 8 are the capitalization rate charts. On starting page 10 up to the last page is the 2017 income and expense information for the subject property. And that's my presentation, Mr. Chair.
Questions, Mr. Ryan?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Monitored and top to bottom, specifically including cap rate, correct?
Page 4, yes.
Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Lynn?
No questions.
Thank you.
Rob?
Just want to have a real quick look here. No, none right now, thanks.
On with your presentation, Mr. Reimer.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Page 6 in this case, please. So, no, not page 6. Yes, that is.
It is page 6.
I got 2 page 6s.
That's discouraging.
In any event, the page 6 with a chart on it.
Yes, I do.
In this case, and I asked Mr. Valderrama specifically about cap rate because this fundamentally is a cap rate decision, and the income, as we can see in our line 33, our NOI is within, call it $15,000 of the department, so not a material difference. The cap rate we're suggesting in this case is 6%, based on our slightly lower NOI, it results in a value of $9,317,000, and we request that the board order accordingly. Thank you.
Questions, Mr. Valderrama?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Looks like on this property, the discounts isn't working for them. It seems that vacancy percent is increasing, is that correct?
Indeed, it isn't working for them.
Okay, unlike the other property that was discussed.
Yeah, I mean, it's the best they can do to try and reverse the trend, but no, based on the numbers that are there, it had not yet certainly had any effect.
And there's no renovations going on unlike the other properties?
Well, again, if you look on our R&M, our stabilized R&M is $143,000 over the 5 years. The numbers have been much more consistent in that range, so I'd suggest there wasn't any significant items of capital at all in those figures.
Okay, that's all the questions I have.
Lynn, any questions?
No questions.
Rob?
No, thank you.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. That concludes the matters for today.
Thank you.
Thank you.